President Trump is about to participate in a family photo with European leaders after his meeting with Zelenskyy of Ukraine. Joining me now, Republican Congressman Tim Burchett from Tennessee, member of the House Oversight Committee, and a number of others, including Foreign Affairs. Congressman, you've been very vocal about America's funding for Ukraine. The U.S. has led the entire world in military, financial, and humanitarian aid for the country. Your thoughts on the president's talks with Mr. Zelenskyy today?
Yes, sir. I'm concerned that we're borrowing $200 billion, and President Zelenskyy even says he doesn't know where half of that money went. I'm very concerned about it. I'm concerned about the war pimps in Washington that profit from this. You know, members of Congress, they talk real tough and they rattle the sabers, but I'll guarantee you not one dadgum one of their kids is going to go off and fight in some war that most of the members of Congress probably couldn't find on a globe. So, yeah, I'm really concerned, and so is President Trump. He doesn't want to see any American boys and girls hurt. He doesn't want to see anybody else hurt. I think that's why he had the negotiations in Alaska, largest oil reserves in the world, possibly. And it's no secret that we got Russia. I mean, we got Alaska from Russia at a pretty good deal. And I think that President Trump understands that second to our military might is our economic might. And he understands the market of oil and what can happen with Russia if we were to flood some of those markets. And again, it's no secret that we are exporting energy again. And that puts us at a very powerful position. Right. Nothing President Trump does is by accident. It's all by plan. And everybody's talking about how they're ganging up on him. Trump, they ain't ganging up on Trump, brother. He's got him just where he wants him, and he will see when this thing's over. I'm convinced.
So, Congressman, you mentioned the economy. Jerome Powell is set to give his big speech this Friday at Jackson Hole. The theme is labor markets in transition. How do you rate the chairman's job, and who would you like the president to appoint as his successor, if you have one?
Very poor. I would rate him very poor right now. I would recommend Art Laffer. I don't think he'd do it. I don't think he'd take the cut and pay. He lives over in Nashville near Senator Blackburn. I live in Middle Tennessee. I like Art Laffer. You know, he negotiated with Reagan and the Iron Lady. He got the world's economy, I thought, in a pretty good shape back then. Also, the fact I remember when he came to the state legislators speak, a lot of people didn't know who he was, and then I asked him about his relationship in the question and answer session about his relationship with President Reagan and the Iron Lady, and people started coming in from the gallery just to hear him speak. And then he invited me and a group of my fellow state senators to his house for dinner, and he bragged about making great lasagna. And then when I went to the bathroom, I looked in the trash can, and it was Stouffer's, and nobody knew the difference. So, yeah, Art Laffer is my guy.
I like Stouffer's, though. It's very good lasagna. But I have to move on, Congressman. President Trump's tariffs.
Yes,
it is, I got to say. Let's get to talk about the tariffs, bringing in unprecedented revenue. What should be done with the big windfall? Because it's kind of not being put to good use because government spending is so high. It kind of just offsets it, doesn't it?
I think so, but what we're not told, the CBO did not take into consideration, 85% of those folks are Democrats. It's pretty well documented. They didn't take into consideration the growth we're going to see from energy and other sectors when Trump cuts down on what's going on at the EPA. Lee Zeldin's doing a great job. I think you're going to see America's economic output incredibly increased. They don't want America to succeed. They don't want Trump to succeed. They hate this country. They hate everything we stand for. And that's what the Washingtons quit calling it a swamp. A swamp is something pretty cool God created. Washington, D.C. is a man-made sewer, and they want it to fail. And they want President Trump to fail. They want him to fail at this war. They want him to fail at everything. That's how pitiful and miserable they are. They're like the kids in high school that would throw a rock over the fence and run home and hide behind their mama's skirt. Look. We got a real leader in the White House. I think it's time to take him out for a ride.
Very quickly, we're out of time, but you're officially endorsing Senator Marsha Blackburn in a run for governor, which means there's a vacant Senate seat, and there's one person being touted, Tim Burchett. I know there are others who would like it. What about a Senate run?
if given the opportunity, I would not turn it down. I'm not going to be one of those bogus politicians that says, oh, I'm forming a study committee and I've been drafted. If I've given the opportunity, I would love to be in the U.S. Senate. There's no bigger challenge in the world, and I think they could use somebody like me maybe to shake things up. But yeah, Marsha Blackburn, the best man for the job is a woman in this case. Very few states in this country have an income tax. And the reason we don't have an income tax in Tennessee, when Al Gore just had invented the internet, if you remember, Marsha Blackburn got on the internet and told the people about what was getting ready to happen, and she stopped the state income tax. She's got more guts than most men I know, and I think Tennessee would be well served to have her, brother. Thank you for asking.
Well, I'm glad I did. Congressman, thank you. And you know what? I live in Middle Tennessee as well. And you can tell by the accent, I sound just like you.
I was going to say.
Congressman, thank you so much.
That's a great accent, by the way. I thought you were maybe from Clarksville or Cheatham County. I wasn't sure. Well, my buddy John Rich over there in Kid Rock probably needs you to have you singing backup.
You don't know how close you are, but I won't get into it. Congressman Burchett, great stuff. Thank you so much.